are listening to the Solar Panel, the Phoenix Sun Show.
Hey there, hi there, ho there. Welcome to another edition of the Sun Solar Panel New Year edition. Zona, I haven't talked to you since last year. How you doing, man?
Not bad. Out here on the East Coast now, staying in an Airbnb. Just got back from the Celtics game the other night, and wasn't the best game to go to, but it was a great experience. And I was actually pleasantly surprised. All the Celtics fans were pretty nice. They're probably in a good mood since they're killing us. But
when you're up 30, you don't have to fight.
Exactly. There was a Suns fan that did get thrown out though, so that was fun. A couple sections over in a Barkley jersey. But
okay, not you then.
Oh no. I was busy chilling and just enjoying the experience.
See, if people would have given you a hard time, you could have, do you know who I am? Do you know who I am?
Yeah, I wasn't trying to be the next Suns in 4 guy. But no, it was a fun time.
Or flashing the cash.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, welcome to everybody in the chat. You are listening to the Solar Panel. My name is Dave King. I've been on this show for many, many years. Zona joined me in 2021, made 2021 the best year ever of the Sun Solar Panel. I appreciate you all still being here. Many of you have been here for years and went through all the way through this whole pandemic and still going on the pandemic. Thank you. Hello. Thank you for joining us. Buck Dog, I see you in the chat. Fabio, I see you in the chat. Happy New Year to everybody. And let's hope 2022 is better than any year has ever been. We have a special
last year.
Yeah, go ahead. It's going to be tough to top. For the Suns, it's going to be tough to top last year for sure. There's one way in particular the Suns can top last year, but it's going to be a tough road. It's going to be real hard for them to make that happen, I'm sure. But if any team can do it, the Suns can do it. So what we're doing today on our show, at some point, hopefully we're going to have a special guest. PLR is going to try to join us, but new year, new internet connections and all that. And I think he's having a tough time getting in on the show. But for now, we are Dave and Zona here, and we are going to spend a few minutes recapping the last year, making sure everybody remembers just how good 2021 was. Because if you watched the Suns lose to the Celtics on Friday, you were a little bit reminded of what 2018 looks like. You know, I mean, that was a bad game. So before we go back and look at the rest of the year, let's bring in PLR. PLR, how you doing, my man?
I am good. Was having major internet troubles this morning.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. New year, new internet. That's what we're saying around here.
I know, huh? What's going on, guys? How are you guys? Happy New Year.
We're doing great. Happy New Year to you. I hope you had a good New Year. I hope you had a good Christmas, and I hope you weren't one of the people doing fireworks for 12 straight hours on New Year's Eve in my neighborhood.
Well, no. Out here in Chandler, I thought there was a professional show going on. It was nonstop. It's like, good Lord. Are there not? I feel like an old man. Someone call the cops. This crap can't
I felt like an old man too, but they started at 4, and I'm like, oh, that's cool, that's fine. Still going at midnight, obviously. Okay, 2 a.m. All right, now, come on now, let's get some sleep.
I said, felt like an old man. I'm like, I'm gonna call it. You know what? I'll call the cops. When I go outside and start pointing houses out.
My part of the city, the cops don't give a crap about. They have actual crime to worry about in my part of the city. They don't care about fireworks.
I'm from the
civil
rough
disputes
streets of
are
South,
not an issue.
rough streets of South Chandler, so our police have a lot of time on their hands.
Oh, hello, there you go.
Hearing...
Hello, this is the cool way to say it. I saved the fireworks for the bedroom. All right, there you go, my man. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, PLR. We are going to spend a few minutes. Let's spend a few minutes recapping the season. Again, for those who watched the Suns play the Celtics on Friday, you were reminded of how bad it can be for a Phoenix Suns team with Devin Booker as your leading scorer, but still losing and being down by 30 at some point during the game. And the opposing coach at one point calling a disgusted timeout because the Suns got the lead under 20. So I think those of us who remember those days of Phoenix Suns basketball need a little bit of a refresher on how good this past year was for the Phoenix Suns. One thing I do want to share, let's start out. The Suns had 88 wins in the calendar year of 2021. 88 wins. That is the second most all time for any NBA team to winning games in a calendar year. Do you guys know what team won more games than the Phoenix Suns 88 in 2021 in all of NBA history? PLR?
I'm gonna guess the Bulls.
Zona, do you have a guess?
Yep, it's the Bulls. Them and
It
the Warriors.
It was the
were up there.
Bulls. Yeah, it was the Bulls. They had that, what was it, 72 win season they had. And they won the championship, and they had 89 wins. 2 more wins in the finals than the Suns, and a couple less losses in the playoffs that year too. Yeah. Yeah, the Chicago Bulls are the only team in history. Michael Jordan's peak Bulls were the only team in history to win more games in a calendar year. So you should have felt pretty good about the Suns this past year. That turned out to be the second highest winning percentage in Suns history for a year because there's been less games. The Suns played a lot of games in 2021. That also helps get that 88 wins mark. The next closest in the calendar year of the year where everybody was playing extra games was the Milwaukee Bucks with 84 total wins. But this was the second highest winning percentage in Suns history, behind the 62 win team that year. And then they went on to the next season and won a lot as well. This also in 2021 overall for the year was the first time in 19 years that the NBA and WNBA teams from the same city made their respective finals. And I was fortunate enough to cover both of those. So were you, PLR?
Yep.
How'd that feel going to the finals for both the Suns and the Mercury this year?
I thought it was really cool. It was, what's crazy is neither team was expected to do it. I think that's what made it so much fun. And on the Mercury side, it was like a traveling show. It was a game at GCU, a game at ASU, a game at their own arena.
Yeah.
So
in the playoffs, right? Because the Suns being in the playoffs too. Yeah.
So all over the place. All over the place.
How about you, Zona? This is your biggest year covering the Suns as far as being more ingrained in it and getting as part of the media and all that. What do you think?
Yeah, it's been crazy. Just like looking back at that playoff run, I think obviously it ended like the way that we didn't want it to, but when you just kind of relive those highs, it's going to be tough to top. So, especially that Lakers series in particular, we'll talk about that later, but just closing them out in Staples and, Booker dropping 47, like Chris Paul closing out the Nuggets, and then, winning a tough series against the Clippers, like all that stuff, like we're going to look back on really fondly, I think. And obviously, like the Bucks series kind of put a sour taste in our mouths, but hopefully it just gets them more battle tested and ready for what's to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello has a question. What happened to the Mercury's coach after that? She wasn't re-signed for some reason. What's interesting is Sandy Bordello had been the Mercury coach for 13, 14 years, something like that. She had been the coach for the last 3 WA finals appearances for Diana Taurasi. Taurasi has been on the team all but one of those final appearances as well. And I don't know. It's just one of those things where the team and the coach mutually part ways. Had you heard anything, PLR? Because you're a little bit more on the Mercury than I am.
Yeah, you know what? I've been asking, and even though they parted ways mutually, generally I get the feeling from what I got back was it wasn't her idea to part ways, but you know how it goes. If you're a coach and you're not coming back, you don't say they didn't want me back, because then you don't get another job. So you always go with but from my questioning, again, the answers that I got it was more they wanted another voice, needed another voice to take them to the next level.
Even though that voice got them to the WNBA finals.
Well, Well, you know what though? I think what they're thinking, and you know, I could be wrong, but when you have Skylar and Diana and Brittany, and you're coming off the bench with the firepower they had, I don't think they believe there's a way that team should have lost. And
Gotcha.
so considering going into next year, they are cap heavy with those three. I think they need another pop to get them over the top. So again, that's from what I could tell.
Yeah.
Sandy Brondello has since joined the New York Liberty, I believe, as their coach, and the Mercury are still looking. Sona, were you going to say something?
Oh no, I was actually just going to mention that she's joined the Liberty, and then Becky Hammond signing with the Aces. So a lot of changes over there.
That's
Yeah, that's interesting with Becky signing with the highest salary ever for a WNBA head coach. Becky Hammond joining with the Las Vegas Aces. I'm curious, do you guys think, well, I guess we wouldn't know, but is it better to be an NBA assistant coach, or is it better to be a WNBA head coach if you're a woman trying to prove something in the world?
I would say
I guess
probably
we don't know, do
NBA.
we?
I'm sorry, but
NBA, just because you're already in the league, you know, like it's probably easier to make that transition, but it's never happened, so there's no way of really knowing for sure.
I think it's disappointing that she got that job, to be honest with you.
Becky?
I don't care I don't care if she's highest paid or not. I remember probably about 4 years ago, she coached the summer league team in Vegas and did a magnificent job with the Spurs. And I think it's sad that she knows basketball. She's a coach. She knows hoops, and she has to leave an NBA bench to go take a job to quote unquote get the reward of being the highest paid coach in the WNBA to prove that she knows how to coach, so she can coach in NBA. When we cover the league, and we know there's a bunch of coaches out there that don't know what the hell they're doing. So why is it that she can't get a job there and has to step away? Now, you know, if it's something that she wants, more power to her. But I think it's a bunch of bull crap that she has to leave to go, quote unquote. Now there's a different amount of pressure, because if Vegas they don't win, it's, well, look how well she's paid. She couldn't get that team over the finish line, and our chances to come back will be even harder. I think she should have got offered a job in the NBA, but not because she's a woman, but because she can flat out coach. And compared to some of the guys they've got, she's a better coach. So I'm disappointed in that it had to work out this way for her, and she just didn't get the job in the NBA.
Yeah, I'm disappointed for her too. I was hoping that she would get a head coaching job in the NBA and prove herself, just for the fact that to prove that women can do just as well as men. There's a ceiling in these hiring practices, and there's a ceiling to how far anyone but a certain color and gender can make it, and that's just, it is what it is. And I'm looking forward to the day that ceiling gets broken. Unfortunately, it won't be Becky at this point, because you're right, PLR. She's kind of stuck now, right? Now that she took that job, coming back, I mean, if she wins championships, maybe that'll get her back in the league in the NBA level, but she's not going to get further than she already was as an assistant. So it's going to be tough. But still, she broke barriers by being a female coach in the NBA. There are now a half a dozen female coaches in the NBA. And I was kind of hoping Monty Williams would bring Sandy Brondello onto the Suns staff. But I'm sure she'd rather be a head coach than an end of bench assistant. And the Suns wouldn't have a chance to hire for their staff until next summer anyway. And Sandy wanted to coach, so good for her. But I would have been excited if she'd have been on the Suns bench as well. All right, let's go back to the Suns. There's one other season-wide stat that I want to talk about. I want to mention that I don't know. I mean, some of you may have heard this before, some of you may not have, but I wanted to make sure that we share it on the show. And let me just do this really quick. I've already shared some stats, and this stat is the most impressive to me. The Suns are the only, in 2021, The Suns made it to the top 2 in the Western Conference, and they made the NBA Finals. They're only the second team ever to rise from bottom 2 in the league to top 2 in the league in only 2 seasons. Bottom 2 to top 2, second team ever. Do you guys know what other team has done that? Bottom 2 to top 2 in 2 years or less.
I'll take a guess. Oklahoma City Thunder. Back with the KD Westbrook days.
Yeah, they actually remember that article on not them, but do you remember the article on ESPN? I think it might have been John Hollinger, but it was one of the smart guys who pointed out when the Thunder, who I think at the time were the Sonics, they won only like 23 games with KD and Russ, and I think James Harden might have been a rookie at that point, but it was at least those two. And they pointed out KD had the worst plus minus in the league and might not be a winning player. And the OKC Thunder went to the conference finals after that and have been pretty good ever since. Certainly KD. But no, that's not the team. Is there PLR? Can you guess?
Is it the San Antonio Spurs?
No. That would be a good guess too, to be from bottom 2 to top 2, because when they drafted Tim Duncan and they got David Robinson back in the same year. But no, not them. This would be in the 2000s. I'm going to let you guys keep guessing. I'm going to look in the comments here because I left that page. Sixers, Bucks, Bulls, but I got one winner out here, Fabio, the 08 Celtics. With Paul Pierce and a couple of those other guys that were on that team. Rajon Rondo was a rookie, I believe. Al Jefferson was on their team. They had lost. They had been one of the worst teams in the league. They got the number 2 and the number 5 picks in the NBA draft, I believe, or something like that. And they were terrible. And then they traded for, as you guys all remember, Kevin Durant and Ray Allen that summer, and went to the finals and had the best record in the league. They actually did it in only 1 year, the Celtics. And then there was another time that same franchise went from worst to best. And that was when Larry Bird was drafted. That's way right. Back in I think it was 80 or 81. Yeah.
79.
Yep. 79?
79.
Oh, yeah. Magic Johnson came out. Did he come out the same year? Yeah.
Well, Bird was actually drafted the year before, but there was that old NBA loophole, so he was able to stay in college, play 1 year, and then join the Celtics.
Gotcha, but they were rookies the same year, weren't they?
They were rookies the same year. It was a crazy loophole. The old NBA draft had so many cool loopholes that they don't do anymore.
Well, back then they just wanted the rights to the guys. They were such a fledgling, young league. Wow. Okay. Yes. So the Suns became one of only 2 franchises in NBA history to go from second, at least one of the 2 worst to one of the 2 best within 2 years. All right. So that is our first quarter review. Any other season-wide or year-wide comments you guys want to make about the 2021 Suns before we start? I'm going to break down the season by segments after this. Any other comments before I go to the next section?
I think we covered it. I think the segments should, give us a better look at the individual stuff and clear all that up.
I agree. So the Suns started the 2020-2021 season with an 8-8 record. If you guys remember, there was questions as to whether CP and Devin Booker could coexist and maximize each other's potential. They were only 8-8, like I said, after 16 games. After that, they went 43-13 in 2021. Best record in the league by far. They had the best offense in the league after February 1. This same team, who finished 7th overall on offense for the season, was number 1 after February 1 for most of the season. That's how much they struggled the first couple of months of the season, that they only got up to 7th. But they were number 1 in offense after February 1. They were also 20-5 in the clutch in that second half of the year as well. 20-5. Unbelievable in the clutch. CP, of course, is a great clutch player. Devin Booker became a great clutch player. What other do you guys have other comments about how the Suns were in the regular season? How your belief in the team, did it change, or did you know all along that team would finish with one of the best records in the league? We'll start with you, Zona.
Yeah, I think early on, a lot of Suns fans hit the panic button with how they started, but I think everyone knew it was going to take time, especially trying to get Chris Paul and Devin Booker to mesh. And once they did, I knew that backcourt was going to be a problem in the West. Like, I didn't know they're going to finish like with the second best record in the NBA, but I definitely thought it was a team that, if things clicked, that they could make noise in the playoffs, and they certainly did.
What about you, PLR?
There are two things that stand out. One, this is kind of funny. Made a side bet with a friend of mine who owes me a steak at DC Steakhouse because I said the Suns would finish in the top four seed when the season started. So I got to remind him to pay that off. And then two, I remember distinctly because during that game, I think they were either 8-8 or 9-8 or 8-7. And Monty Williams, who never gets upset, came to the podium and was pissed off. And he was like, it said something like consistency or I mean, he was just, I don't remember the words exactly, but he was hot. And it was like, this is like that parent that never gets mad. And when they get mad, everyone listens. And after that press conference, they just took off. And Dave, I think you were there too, and it just it resonated kind of with all of us because that was the first time we heard Monty kind of sound pissed off. So that's when they took off. That's what stands out for me more than anything. It's like that was the changing of the Suns after that press conference.
I remember it. They had I may have it's slightly wrong, but I think it was a loss to the Pelicans. And but it was after a loss like that, it dropped into, like you said, right around 8-8. It might not have been exactly the 8-8 game that got him to, the loss that got him to 8-8, but man, it was just it was incredible the effect that seemed to have on the team. Even though the next day he said, "Oh, sorry about that. I shouldn't have been." He apologized basically to the world for having reacted like that. He's not a guy who throws his team under the bus, but he was so angry. Didn't even take any questions. I think it was the shortest press conference ever.
Consistency.
He came in, made some comments, said consistency about 5 times in 42 seconds, and then walked out. Didn't even take questions.
That was great. I still remember someone, I forget who it was, said, "Any other questions?" We're all looking at each other like, no. We're good. Because I remember the Kellen Olson asking a question, and he said, "Consistency." And Kellen asked one more question, like, "Consistency." And that was and that was a wrap.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that was pretty incredible. And then they just suddenly just became a machine. And I remember Devin Booker saying all season, "We're locked in. We're locked in. This is important."
Yeah,
Every game is
I just looked up the game. And it was actually on ESPN, the Pelicans Suns game. They lost by 20.
Yeah,
and they're short. The Pelicans are shorthanded too. So Monty had every right to be, the way he was that day, and they needed it. I think it's good for him to every once in a while, like with how steady he is, to just kind of, let it all out like that. And like you said, like the players are going to be way more likely to listen to someone that rarely bursts out like that, rather than someone that's constantly like that. So I think his demeanor is huge, and like over the course of the season, just staying consistency, as he would say.
They've already got the big burst guy and Chris Paul on the court. But what's interesting about Chris Paul is that he'll yell at you in the game, but then after the game, it's all good. It's teaching moments and just constant talking, but he doesn't berate people except in the game. So that my recollection was for me, it was the development of DeAndre Ayton throughout the season. I swear he was always such a good soldier, but he was the whipping boy as far as he was beaten down every single day in practice for not rolling exactly the way he was supposed to roll, not rolling with consistency. He played great. Look, when we talk about DeAndre Ayton being a little not as aggressive as he needed to be, or not as productive as he needed to be, we're only talking about the offensive end. He was great on defense all season. The Suns were one of the top 10 defenses in the league last season. And DA never had an issue with consistency or physicality on defense. It's offense we're talking about. So when I talk about this, that's what I mean is doing pick and roll with Chris Paul, being aggressive on the roll. And he went, it got to the point where Chris Paul would just stop passing to him and kind of almost not in a bad way freezing him out, because the Suns had just so many more options on offense for scoring. But they would use DA's role to suck in the defense and then hit a 3-point shot on the outside. And like I said, they had the number one offense in the league in the second half of the year, the last actually 60 or so games, 55 games. But my biggest recollection from the season was the development of DeAndre Ayton from, I don't know what I'm supposed to do right now, to slowly figuring it out over the course of the year offensively, to by the end of the season, he was as dangerous as anybody else on the floor. And then in the postseason, he was just incredible. And that was all with them not overusing him, right? He still only got 10 shots a game. That's just the way it was. Whereas the year before he'd gotten 15, and he never complained. It took him time to figure it out. And that whole slow roll for DeAndre Ayton offensively kind of matched the role for the Suns as a team, and they peaked at playoff time. That's my recollection there. The Suns, for the first time in 10 years, had any all-stars. Devin Booker was an injury replacement, and CP was voted in by the coaches as a reserve. That was the first time the Suns had two all-stars since I think it was 2009-10 season. And then and they had Steve Nash had been a solo all-star for them after that, but the first time they had two all-stars since the 9-10 season. And CP3 made all NBA as well. And Devin Booker came in just short, and Mikal Bridges came up just short on the all defense team. Just doing a quick aside. What do you guys think is the chances that Mikal Bridges makes all defense this year on a scale, on a 100% scale? So 100%, 90, 80, 70. What do you think, Zona?
100%, lock it in. Place your bets now. It's happening. I don't know if it's going to be first team, but it should be. If not, he'll make one of the teams for sure. I think last year he should have been on it. Giving it to Thibault, who played 20 minutes a game, as great as he was, like that was still. I mean, and Kawhi, who's kind of just went there off of reputation, and sat out a lot of games. So, but yeah, I think he'll be on first team. If not, he's a lock for second team.
You think it's a lock?
It better be a lock. It better be a lock. Look, I'm going to keep saying this, and I'll say it and say it and say it until I'm proven wrong. The Suns are the most disrespected group of players in the NBA when it's time to give awards. And he should be, Devin Booker should be on an all-NBA team, and he should be an all-star without being an injury replacement. And Monty Williams this year should win Coach of the Year because, I don't know, things come out in the wash. How are the Knicks doing? So let's, I just think for whatever reason, I don't know if it's, honestly, I don't know if it's ownership. I don't know if it's the past 10 years of history. But whenever the Suns do something well, there's an excuse as to why they can't win awards. And if all you have to do to know Mikal is the top defender is watch a game. It doesn't take a lot to see that in the course of a game, he's going to guard the 1, the 2, the 3, and the 4, and then go look at the shooting percentage of the people he guards on a consistent basis. It's not rocket science. Just open your eyes. So hopefully 100% this year.
Yeah, Monty Williams oh, sorry. Go ahead, Zona.
Oh, no, I was just going to say real quick, I think being on national TV more this year, too, is going to help a lot with that. Like that game against Steph, that first game, like what he did and the discussion around that was like unlike anything I've seen for Suns players in a while. So I think, the second half of the season, they're going to have a lot more on national TV. So that's definitely going to help if he keeps having, games like that.
Monty Williams did win Coach of the Year by his coaching brethren, right? The Coaches Association gave him Coach of the Year. It was the media that gave Tom Thibodeau Coach of the Year. So it shows you a little bit of the regional bias on the media there. And then James Jones won Executive of the Year as voted by his peers as well. So the Suns did, but you're right. It's the media really that shorts the Suns a little bit. What's frustrated me for the past couple of years is the coach is shorting Devin Booker on the All-Star team. He's a two-time All-Star now, but that's only because Adam Silver picked him as an injury replacement 2 years in a row. What do you guys think are the chances that Devin Booker gets just picked by coaches to be a reserve this year? Because it's very unlikely he's going to be voted in as a starter. It takes too much to have that happen. It's going to be Steph Curry, and it's going to be who else as a starter on? Yeah. Doncic and Steph Curry are going to be the starters at guard. But what do you guys think are the chances Devin Booker is picked by the coaches as a reserve and doesn't need to wait for an injury replacement? So PLR, you first this time.
I think it's 100% this time. There was so much hoopla last year when it didn't happen. Plus, just look at the West. I mean, who's been better? And you have to put it all together on a winning team, stats, all of it put together. He has to be there. Plus, technically, he could still beat out Luka because it's not just fan vote anymore. It's player vote and coaches vote. As we saw, I think it was 3 years ago when Derrick Rose was having that amazing 6-man of the year type deal, and he had the votes, but the coaches and the players didn't vote him in as a starter, and then he missed the game altogether. So technically, the coaches and the players could make Devin a starter, although I don't think that'll happen. But I think he's definitely in the game.
For sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think and Luka could also be shifted over to forward too. So there's some room there for Steph and Booker to start in the backcourt. But I think he's a lock to make it for sure. Starting, he's gonna probably have to go on another hot run to close the gap just because he missed some time. But yeah, I think last year their slow start and his slow start too a little bit kind of leaked into that voting. And then you look at what he did at the end of the year and you're just kind of like, how did this guy not make it outright? But I think this year their record combined with how well he's been playing, there's no excuse for him not to be. So I think it's a lock. It's just a matter of whether or not he's going to start. And, it's probably going to be between him, Donovan Mitchell, and Luka, possibly shifting positions for that starter spot. So, yeah, you just look at the Suns' record and what they've done. There's no excuse for him and Paul should just both be locks.
What's really weird, Dave? I'm sorry, Dave.
Ahead,
I'm sorry, but what's really weird? Marketing has a lot to do with that as well. Luka came over with a lot of marketing. Steph is Steph. When you look at and Zona made a good point. When you look at Donovan Mitchell and Devin Booker, there's no big marketing campaign for them the same way. I mean, we don't know what shoes Donovan wears or Devin wears. There's not a ton of commercials. There's not a ton of movie type stuff going on around them. And I think that plays a lot when you're coming up in a league in terms of the rest of the world and the rest of the country seeing you. Devin hasn't captured the country enough to get votes to be a starter. And I don't know if that's something he wants or doesn't want, but he doesn't, it hasn't been embraced to him the same way it has with Luka and with Steph. And that's why they will always probably be starters as long as they play.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing it's I got to give Book credit for is he figured out, I don't know if he did, obviously he did it on purpose because he made sure it got on TV and all that stuff, but his love of old cars and his style, honoring his Mexican roots and all that. He's definitely unique. He's created a unique style, and that's gotten him a lot more publicity. And maybe that was, some of Kendall and her family's doing on, hey man, you got to have a unique style. You can't just be a quiet dude that never speaks up. You got to have the way you got to look the right way. And so I got to give him credit for that. Okay, so I think we're all in agreement that CP is definitely going to make the All-Star game, just because the coaches know that he's the guy they have to scheme against to beat the Suns, and Booker's going to make it because of what happened in the playoffs last year and how well he's doing again this year, for sure. So the Suns definitely have 2 All-Stars. I talked with I talked with So Says Jay and Darth Voida last week about the chances that DeAndre Ayton could be an all-star this year. What do you guys think about DeAndre Ayton's chances? Let's do chances. What are his chances to be named by the coaches as a reserve among big men for the all-star game this year?
It's going to be tough because you obviously have Jokic and Gobert is probably just, again, off reputation and how well Utah is playing. Then you look at Karl Anthony Towns. And outside of that, though, I think the path is pretty clear for DeAndre. It's just going to come down to who else is going to sneak in. And I think he's definitely on the border. So I'm going to give it probably like a 40-60% chance of it happening. But I wouldn't hold my breath just because, we're used to the Suns players getting the short end of the stick. So I don't think he's going to make it, but I think he should.
What do you think, PLR?
I say 0%. There's no zero. And here's why: because they don't vote for center position anymore. They vote for front court players. And so once you have Jokic as a starter, because he will be, and then you start going through the rest of the front court, they're going to go with names. Even though AD's been hurt, I bet you he gets voted in. He'll be healthy by then. LeBron, of course, will get voted in. And then you start going down the name threshold. So I just don't think he has enough name rec when you add forwards to the mix. If it was an old-fashioned center position, then I would say he would have a better chance. But with him being a front court player, like Zona said, once they go through Karl Anthony Towns, who has more name swag right now, Gobert and Jokic, I doubt very, very seriously if they do a fourth center with all the forwards that play in the Western Conference. So I'm saying 0%.
I say I agree with you that it's probably going to be down to, but for you, okay, I'm going to say a couple of things. First of all, your comment that, you know what, it's not centers they're voting for and as reserves, it's front court players. I totally agree with you. Yet every single year they've picked one or two centers, the coaches have. And you already mentioned them, Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns. Gobert basically replaced Towns as the reserve center. I just think it's going to come down to those three: Ayton, Towns, and Gobert. Gobert, I don't think they ever really wanted Gobert in the All-Star game, but they finally gave him credit, but he keeps losing in the second round of the playoffs, and I know that teams think they can scheme against him. And Karl Anthony Towns hasn't really proven anything yet. So I'm going to put it around 40% as well, like Zona says. And what's fascinating to me is that we're even talking about this. A year ago, it would have been laughable to think about DeAndre Ayton as an all-star this quickly. We all thought he had the potential, but we didn't know that he had the reality yet. And now, a year later, we're talking about what's it going to take to get him in. I was listening to the Dunker Spot pod, and I don't know if you guys listen to that, but it's got Nekias Duncan and Steve Jones Jr. We've had both of them on as guests on the solar panel, and they're one of the biggest NBA pods out there. They're top 10 or so, certainly top 3 for me, national pods. Nekias Duncan, they did their early all-star picks, right? Obviously it can change, but they did their early all-star picks. Nekias Duncan picked DA as a reserve for the all-star game. And Steve Jones Jr. Said DA was one of his first alternates after he didn't pick DA, but he said DA was one of his last outs on not picking as a reserve. So the name recognition is there nationwide. They saw what DA did in the playoffs. They see what the Suns are doing now, and they see that he is an integral part of their entire team. And so I would not be surprised to see if coaches, and Steve Jones Jr. was a former coach, if coaches agree. So I'm really curious to see him at least get votes, significant votes, and maybe not. I mean, obviously they don't tell us coaching, just outside the coaches list or anything like that. But I think he'll be on the snubs for sure, if not actually voted in to the All-Star game by the coaches. That'll be real interesting.
Yeah, I have a couple things to add to that too.
Go ahead, please.
So I think his main path to getting in is probably going to be injury replacement. That's where I took the 40% out. So I think Anthony Davis gets injured just, picking up the paper. So
Getting the
I
Coke out
don't
the
see him
fridge.
playing in the game. Yeah. So I think that's one route for him, just being an injury replacement. And the other thing is like the dunker spot, they actually watch the Suns. The national media and all the people that vote do not. So that's also another factor. I think, people that watch, they know how important he is, but yeah, it's going to be a tough path, but I think there's going to have to be at least one or two injury replacements for him to get consideration.
All right, let's move along here. I wanted to highlight 2021 in segments so we remember the season and the year properly, because this was the greatest year of Suns basketball. It certainly they won as many games as any prior team, if not obviously more. They had a great winning percentage and huge success, and they're sustainable. It wasn't a one-year wonder. So let's recap everything that happened once we hit the playoffs. Tell me your recollection of the Lakers series. What's the first thing that comes to mind, PLR? Your recollection of the Lakers series?
At the very end, when LeBron James says, they kicked our ass, there's nothing more to say about it. That's the first thing that always comes to my mind, because they just put it on him. And I got so sick of hearing AD got hurt, because if I remember correctly, CP was banged up as well. So
He had one arm.
yeah, so honestly, okay, so watching Devin Booker turn into that guy, and when it counted the most, I think is the one thing that stood out outside of that quote. It's easy to be good in a regular season. And don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we could do it. I'm not saying a lot of guys in the NBA could do it, but there's been a lot of guys that have done well and played on bad teams. But for him to turn it on when it meant the most and show the world, I haven't just been a good player on a bad team. I'm a really good player on a really good team. There was a certain amount of vindication that I felt for him, and that really stood out when he just put his foot on the Lakers' neck. So I think you put all that together, that whole series, it almost seems like a blur, because it was just so much fun to watch and so much fun to watch Book.
It was so much fun to watch Book. That was the series where where Devin Booker shattered his personal three-pointers record in a game. Remember, he had hit 6 3-pointers in a game, about 84 times, and never hit the 7th. And then he makes 8 of 10 in Game 5 in LA. No, was it Game 5 at home or Game 6 in LA? He made 8 of 10 threes and basically closed out the Lakers all by himself. It was pretty incredible. Yes, the Lakers had some injuries, but yes, the Suns had some injuries as well. I find it ridiculous to say that AD would have dominated the whole series, because the Suns, their whole point last year was that they could adapt to the other team. What they were so good at last year was the Suns could adapt to the other team and adjust their defense accordingly. And while AD had some good games, they had plenty of time to have adjusted for that. LeBron was not himself, still isn't himself this year. LeBron is to the stage of his career now where he's putting up the numbers, but they aren't as impactful as they used to be. And that's why, he's getting the headlines on SportsCenter when the Lakers have lost 5 of 6. So that's just the way it is. The Suns beat the Lakers soundly. And that's all there is to say about that. And Jay Crowder salsa danced all over them.
Yeah, the salsa dance and Booker breaking his record for threes are the two things that stand out the most to me, for sure.
Absolutely. And DA was incredible that entire series, by the way. I tried to look it up, but I couldn't find it. So maybe I'm
like
wrong.
80%, right?
Yeah, he made 80% of his shots in that series. And I think he set a record for most 15 and 10 games to start a playoff career. Like first playoff games ever, he had the most straight 15 and 10 games, something like that. But by game 6, he wasn't even needed to have a great game. That was his first non-double-double, I believe, because they blew out the Lakers so badly. He didn't even play enough minutes. Okay, so that was the Lakers series. Then there's the Nuggets. Suns in 4. That's my biggest recollection of playing the Suns playing the Nuggets. And I don't love that that's my best recollection, but that is my best recollection from the series. What's your biggest recollection from the series, Zona?
Yeah, I think Suns in 4 is going to live forever, for better or worse. Also, just the Suns fans taking over Denver's stadium. That game 4, it was a closeout game. Chris Paul put them away, and just like the little flex he did after one of his layups, and like just it felt like it was in Phoenix with how loud it was. So that's kind of what I'll take away from that series. It was just pure dominance and just really fun to watch.
Absolutely. PLR, what's your recollection from the Nuggets series?
Well, the Suns in 4 for sure, but wasn't there a Jokic Devin Booker incident, or wasn't that in the playoffs?
Yeah, Jokic against Campaign.
Campaign, yeah, and the Jokic brothers looking at the Suns. That's I know that we're always Suns, but when the Jokic brothers stand up and give you that look, I always find that entertaining. So outside of the Suns in 4, the intimidation of the Jokic brothers, I thought that was kind of funny how they always give that look whenever their little 7-foot brother gets into anything with anybody.
Their little brother, yeah. Well, also my recollection was that was the only series in which the Suns were as healthy as they could be, right? Because CP had one arm in the first round, and then he got COVID in the third round, and then there was injuries throughout, minor knick-knack injuries throughout the finals. But when the Suns were healthy, they completely just blew Denver off the floor. Denver, who had beaten Portland, that same construction of team. Yeah, we talk about Jamal Murray not being there, but they had beaten Portland in 6 and pretty clearly. And then that same Denver team without Jamal Murray went 18-5 to finish the regular season to get their seed and their third seed in the conference. That is not a Denver team that was struggling. That is a Denver team that was smoking. And then the Suns just blew them out of the water. So that's my best recollection from that round, besides the Suns in 4 guy. Also, the kid who tore his shirt off in the playoffs, I think that was pretty good. That kid is still famous today. I mean, we're going to see something 25 years from now. This is what he looks like today. Remember that kid? The kid in the stands of the Suns game where, yeah, I thought that the Suns fans overall were incredible. During the playoffs, they got almost as many headlines as the team. And big props to the Suns fans. That arena was rocking. I had the greatest time covering the team during those games. Okay, PLR, you got to go. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you for giving us a lot of your Sunday morning. Tell us where we can find you around the internets before you beg off.
Sure, on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook at the Sports Cave. Cave is with the K, and then the Cave Show is Monday through Friday. Go to thesportscave.com, 1:00 every day, and definitely hit the listen live button. And you guys, hey man, I appreciate it, and have a great start to your year. So I like that. I like the beanie. I was actually looking for my beanie. I couldn't find it this morning. So
appreciate it.
Hey, you guys, I appreciate it. Appreciate you guys, and have a good rest of your show.
Thank you so
Take
much.
care. Thanks for coming on.
Yep, thanks for coming on, man. All right, let's move on now to the conference finals, Zona. They beat the Clippers in 6 games, and the Clippers had just beaten the Jazz. The Jazz were a little. Donovan Mitchell had a twisted ankle, but he still scored 40 points a game, so it couldn't have been that bad, The Jazz basically showed that they showed once again that they have a limit. It's possible that this year the Jazz will do kind of what the Bucks did. Finally, after 4 disappointing years in the playoffs, the Bucks pushed through and rose to a new level. But pretty much the Jazz are the Jazz. The Clippers beat them without Kawhi. Paul George was incredible. They come in, they play Phoenix, and Phoenix had a pretty easy time beating the Clippers as well. That did go 6 games, but really it was set to be over in 5, except the Suns basically took a game off, and they laid an egg in Game 5 at home for the worst game of their playoffs, and then they came out and kicked their butts in Game 6. What's your biggest recollection of the Suns beating the Clippers in the Western Conference Finals?
I mean, it's obviously the alley-oop. I think that play is like the play of the entire playoff run for the Suns. The NBA released their like top 10 plays of the year yesterday or day before, and that was like number 2 overall, I think. So we're not going to talk about what number 1 was, PTSD from that, but yeah, I think that was definitely the play that'll go down in Suns history. Like you'll see that on flashbacks like 50 years from now. So it's just that was an easy pick. But then also, I think you got to give the Clippers some credit for being shorthanded. Like Ty Lue did a great job of doing everything he could to be a pain in the ass in the Suns. And, Patrick Beverley was, a reckless menace again and breaking Booker's nose. But yeah, it was a gritty series. And, Beverley, Fabio pointing out that he shoved Chris Paul. So there was a lot that went on in that series, but it was ultimately, I think we all kind of knew the Suns were going to take that without Kawhi.
Yeah, definitely. Patrick Beverley tried to swing the series all by himself with questionable plays for sure. The alley-oop, huge moment for the Suns. Gave them the 2-0 lead, even with Chris Paul being out. People forget because the Suns won the games, but people forget Chris Paul was out the first 2 games of the Western Conference Finals. The Suns had to win the biggest games of their lives without their veteran leader. And what happened? Devin Booker came in and did a 40-point triple-double, only the second triple-double of his entire career. 40-point triple-double in game 1 to lead the Suns to a 1-0 series lead without Chris Paul. I mean, you think about that. 40-point triple-double in the Western Conference Finals. Unbelievable. One of the things that the Clippers could do really well was defend on the perimeter, and Booker still carved him up. And then in game 2, Cam Payne with 29 points, 9 assists, and 0 turnovers. You look at Cam Payne this year, and you wonder how is that even possible, because Cam Payne has been a turnover machine. He's trying to be better than he was last year, and so far it's not working out as well for him. But last year, Cam Payne was a rock coming off the bench. He had one of the top assist to turnover ratios in the entire league a year ago, along with Chris Paul. He told me in a one-on-one interview after the season that his only thought in his mind in that game was, don't turn the ball over. Do whatever you can to hold on to the ball. Don't turn it over, because that's when they can get out and run. And he didn't. 29 points, 9 rebounds, leading to the alley-oop to win the game. And my recollection from the end of that alley-oop game is we shouldn't have even needed the alley-oop to win the game, because the Clippers got a favorable out-of-bounds call. And then that shouldn't have happened, that the Suns should have been able to ice the game even before that alley-oop was needed. But that's a hell of a memory for Suns fans to have. We'll always remember. I don't know if we'll remember more the actual tap in by DA, or the reaction by Stephen A. Smith and Mike Wilbon in the crowd that has become a meme as well. So that was pretty freaking incredible. So the Suns actually, yes, they won the first 2 games, went up 2-0 without Chris Paul. They went up 2-0 on the Clippers. Then they won game 3. No, they lost game 3. Understandably, everyone loses game 3 if they've gone up 2-0. It just happens, except for the Denver series. But anyway, yes, most of the time you lose game 3 after you go up 2-0. Then game 4, I remember that. I was watching that playoff game with family because it was on the road in LA. And almost nobody scored in the fourth quarter. Do you remember that? That's game 4. It was like 80s. The game was in the 80s. And almost nobody scored on either side in the fourth quarter. The Suns' defense was incredible. Their offense was questionable. And they pulled that game out, and they took a 3-1 lead, and that sealed the series for me. Buck Dog has a question for the panel. Do you see any repeat opponents for the Suns in the postseason this year? That's a really good question. So the Suns last year, they played the Lakers, the Nuggets, and the Clippers. All 3 teams are struggling this year. They might make the playoffs, but they're not going to be the top seeds unless they turn it around a little bit. If they turn it around a little bit and play better, Denver seems like they're having a lost year. They've had a lot of years where they played pretty well. They seem to have had a lost year. They might turn it back on when Jamal Murray comes back, but he's not going to be back until March, April. No, I think this year it's going to be different opponents, but I wouldn't be surprised. Those are all playoff level teams, but there's new playoff level teams as well. I think Memphis, I think Golden State obviously would be the one we'll probably end up having to face in the Western Conference Finals because they're just playing so well. But at least two of those teams are going to be in the play-in game. At least two. Well, obviously there's only two teams in a play-in game. No, there's four. Four teams in a play-in game. At least two of those teams the Suns played in the playoffs last year will be in the play-in and have to force their way in. What do you think, Zona? Do you think we're going to have repeats? Do you think one of those teams is going to start playing much better?
I do. I actually think Denver or either Los Angeles team could be in the play-in, and like if we're sitting at the 2 seed and they get the 7 seed, then that could be a first round matchup for all we know. But I'd be very welcome to. I want a full strength Lakers team. I would love that rematch, just to shut their fans up. But yeah, I think the first round there's a good chance that we could see any of those teams. There's also some new blood, like you mentioned, like the Timberwolves are kind of hanging around. The Grizzlies look like they could, possibly take a series, and maybe we could meet them in the second round. But yeah, there's, for the most part, I think just this weird COVID year, it's kind of tough to predict right now. But I think there's definitely a chance for a first round rematch.
All right, so the Suns beat the Clippers to win the Western Conference Finals to make only their third appearance in the NBA Finals in franchise history. That's for 54 years of franchise history, 30 playoff seasons. Only 3 times have they made the finals, and last year was one of them. They took a 2-0 lead in the finals, and there were people around the country, national media, saying, gosh, you know what? The Bucks might get swept in this series. The Suns looked that good in games 1 and 2. And you know what? So says Jay. Yes, I'm going to congratulate the Bucks for playing a good series, and you can't take that away from me, no matter how many times you say it sarcastically in the chat. So anyway, so the Suns took a 2-0 lead in the finals. Then all of a sudden, the Bucks started asserting their dominance. Giannis Antetokounmpo played great, and DeAndre Ayton started regressing a little bit because he was the only big man out there, and the only one who could possibly defend Giannis in those finals, because the Suns just didn't have anybody else. Dario had torn his ACL in the first game of the finals, and so things went down a little bit from there. So what's your takeaway from the finals that makes it so that So Says Jay doesn't have to turn us off?
I think it's a good learning experience. B, something that'll leave a sour taste in their mouths, and hopefully we've seen it already this season, just how fired up they've come out. And I think that especially their young players, guys like Cam and Mikal, DeAndre, and even Booker, just this will be great learning experience for them and make them that much tougher this season in a playoff series, because they've been through that. They've done the game plans, like the scheming for adjustments throughout a series. So I think once you kind of do that and get the hang of it, it doesn't change a lot. It's just just preparing for different opponents. So it could be one of those things that in the long run makes them a better team. So obviously you want to win when you're up 2-0, but the Bucks knew the series wasn't over, and that's a good lesson for, I think, the Suns moving forward.
Absolutely. So let's talk about that. What did the Suns learn, and what have they done differently this year with their team to shore up that weakness that may have been found in the finals?
Just picking up the pace. I think we've already seen just how much faster they're playing. Going from 26th to 4th, or I think they're somewhere in the top 5 right now, but just playing faster because we know they can adjust and play slow in the half court. So I think just having as many, possible ways to attack the defense is something that they need to get better at. And it was exposed a little bit once, the Bucks kind of took a transition away. So I think just playing faster and under control at the same time. I don't know. I think for the most part, they've just looked locked in, and everyone expected them to have a hangover. but with the short turnaround and all that, but they've looked as focused as ever for the most part.
Yeah, absolutely. Going into this season, the Suns actually had talking about this season a little bit, the Suns had an 18-game winning streak, the longest winning streak in franchise history. And they, at one point, then they lost 2 out of 3, and then they won 5 more straight. They had one of the best stretches of a 18-game win streak and a 5-game win streak in Suns history. That is just it's just incredible what the Suns have done this year, the year after, making the finals. Because look at all those teams that have regressed. The Hawks have not looked the same. The Knicks have not looked the same. The Clippers have not looked the same. And again, it doesn't. Yes, Kawhi is out, but they're the same team that made it to the Western Conference Finals and beat the Jazz, and they haven't looked the same. The Lakers haven't looked a lot of the upstart teams from last year have not looked the same, but the Suns do. The Suns are playing really well. This past week, they're going through a little bit of a lull. They've had some COVID issues on the team. They're just mentally out of it, I think, a little bit. That's okay. You go through these periods. They have the second best record in the league this year in the regular season. 2 things that have changed significantly for them since last year. Doesn't mean that's going to help them win a finals, but it is 2 significant things, and you hit on one of them, Zona, is they're playing much faster. Last year, they were 24th in pace. They had to win in half court. They did not try to score fast. They just tried to score as well as possible, and they had the league's 7th best offense. This year, they're 4th in pace, maybe even 3rd at this point. They're playing much faster. They're getting the ball up faster, and they're going out on breaks a lot more than before. I think that, and you're right, what they've said, what Chris Paul said is we've got to find quicker ways to score. So we're not relying on our league best half court offense as much as we had to, because the Bucks were able to focus on that in the finals. And the Suns now, if they're scoring on easy baskets as well as leading the league in half court offense, that's going to make them even tougher to beat. The Suns have not done as well on offense. They're only 9th in the league this year as opposed to 7th last year overall as far as efficiency, but that's because they're in transition. Their version of transition this year is still winning the games, but not being quite as good statistically on offense. But they're going to figure all this out, and they're going to get better in the second half. So I think the Suns have shored up that side. And then the other thing the Suns have done differently this year is having a lot more depth at center. Just yesterday, they signed Bismack Biyombo as a 3rd big who looks just like JaVale McGee, who looks a lot like DeAndre Ayton. DeAndre Ayton is obviously the much more talented of the 3. He can play any defensive set, whereas JaVale has to play a drop scheme and protect the paint, and so does Bismack. But the Suns have gone out of their way to make sure they have more size this year. So size and depth in size has been a big plus until this past week with COVID when everybody got sick. But definitely, as long as you don't have COVID issues, then that is a big thing, the big adjustment that they've made this year, while also bringing back the same guys who led them to the finals last year. So that is, the Suns did learn from their finals loss. Whether that learning lesson gets them through this year's playoffs or not is yet to be seen. A couple of some other big things that happened in the playoffs I want to make sure we don't forget. Devin Booker set an NBA record by 20%, actually. He set an NBA record in a playoff debut of scoring. He scored 601 points, the most points ever by an NBA player in his playoff debut, because they made it all the way to the finals. You would think after 75 years of NBA basketball, some other player had made it to the finals in his first year, right? Other players have. Devin Booker scored more than anybody by 80 points. The next highest was 521 by Rick Barry. So that's pretty incredible. Devin Booker, most playoff points in a debut ever. Chris Paul had the most points by a 36-year-old or older in the finals by a lot. Nobody had ever scored even 100 points in the finals at age 36 plus, and Chris Paul just walloped that. And DeAndre Ayton, he had 6 double-doubles with 15 plus rebounds in the playoffs. That's the 4th most ever. And the guys who had more 15-plus rebound double-doubles in the playoffs are all in the Hall of Fame and are all on the top 75 ever list. He also had the highest field goal percentage ever in the playoffs at any age, not just first playoffs, any playoffs at any age for a player who took at least 100 shots. He made 65.8% of his shots in the playoffs last year. That's pretty freaking incredible. So we should be proud of the Suns for their 2021. I want to thank everybody for being here with the solar panel throughout this past year and experiencing this with us. Now, let's move into another segment of the show. We're going to start talking about today. We're going to talk about real issues dealing with the Suns today. The Suns tonight, they play Charlotte, and then they're moving on with their 2022 part of their season. What are 4 burning questions for us, Zona? I want you to lead this next section. Ask 4 burning questions of me and the folks in the chat about the Suns coming up this year.
Yeah. So true or false? We'll start with the first one, something that just recently happened. Bismack Biyombo will stay with the Suns past the hardship contracts and stay with the team long term.
So true or false? Bismack Biyombo staying with the team longer than 10 days. Look, the dude started 41 games a year ago. He's been sitting out waiting for a real deal, and he hasn't gotten one yet. Last year he made $3.5 million. The year before he made $17 million. He's only 29 years old. I think he could stay with the Suns for the rest of the year, and I think he would be. The Suns have a 15th roster spot still waiting and available. They have money beyond the league minimum to offer. They could, if he plays well. He's going to have to play well. He'll probably play Sunday night against Charlotte because the only other option is Emmanuel Terry, and he's only been with the team 4 days. So I think you'll see him play in the next 10 days, and if he plays well, he'll stick with the team. I think the Suns are looking for that kind of guy for extra center depth for sure. In the chat, we have so says Jay says false. He's not going to be with the team beyond 10 days. What else do you guys have to say about it? Put your votes in the chat and we'll share them with the group. What do you think, Zona? Do you think he's staying beyond 10 days?
I think he will, just because like the wording in Woj's tweet pointing that out, like that doesn't happen by accident. That's agent driven, first of all. Second, I think he would have already signed somewhere to a 10-day if it was just a 10-day. He's a back end rotation player. Like the best way to put it, he's like sort of like Elfrid Payton of bigs for the Suns, where he's not someone you want playing, but if you're going down to like, there's an emergency situation, you need someone to just like eat up minutes and at least be serviceable. He could be thrown in there. They could have used him against Boston. But yeah, I think there's a good chance that he stays long term. They have an open roster spot, and obviously they can apply for Dario like an injury hardship. So down the road, so they could clear up 2 spots and make a trade. So in Kaminsky's situation too, Hello brought that up in the chat. That's another reason I think his injury could be worse than expected. So yeah, I'm going to go yes on that one. True. But we'll see.
Hello, you also made a comment in the chat, CP3 regression for 2022 coming up. I just want to comment on that real quick. CP, it seems like he's going to regress, and we all expect him to regress for sure, and it would not be a surprise. But he actually set some kind of record to start the season this year for the most points and assists and fewest turnovers or something like that only Magic Johnson had ever met in his career. So I haven't seen the regression. He goes through lulls for sure. In this past couple of weeks, he's not looked as good. But let's just keep crossing our fingers. And the more we say it, the more likely it's going to happen. I'm one of those guys it's like, don't say it out loud or it'll happen. So I'm hoping you're wrong on that. Okay, so that's the true false on Bismack Biyombo. I think it does a lot depend on if he does stay beyond 10 days, that means they don't see any timeline yet for Frank to come back, because I think they'd rather just have Frank Kaminsky come back. Yeah, but if there's no improvement on Frank's knee with his stress reaction, they'll definitely keep Biyombo longer, I believe. That leads us to your second true false. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we'll leapfrog over to another big that's been, forced to play basically. Jalen Smith. So true or false, Jalen Smith has shown enough these last few games to warrant long-term consideration.
Jalen Smith has shown enough to prove he's worth keeping around long term. Well, true, false. To me, okay, so on the good side, in the 3 games he's gotten big playing time, 15 points a game, 10 rebounds a game, and a block a game. He's got 3 blocks in the last 2 games. But the problem is he's just not big enough to be your guy in the middle. And the Suns scheme, they funnel all the drivers into the center because DA is so good at deterring and pushing and forcing guys to pass off when they drive to the rim. JaVale McGee, when he's aggressive and he's not in foul trouble, is really good at deterring you from taking shots at the rim. Jalen's and they need that backline guy to run the defense. They need that backline guy to call out the coverages, to call out the help, to say where the defenders are coming. DA is loud and keeps everybody on a string, and JaVale does that as well. Jalen is not ready for that yet. He just doesn't have that, so he cannot be a regular minutes 5 for this team yet. Could he in a few years? Maybe, but not yet. He's not there yet, and he doesn't have the size to actually be a deterrent either. So I have a hard time seeing Jalen in this scheme where the center is the dude where all the traffic is funneled to, and he's got to run the defense and call the coverages. And I don't see Jalen as the power forward either because he doesn't have the range and he doesn't have the ability to defend in space. The Suns require their forwards to be able to defend in space. If you're not the guy in the middle in the paint dropping back, then you've got to be able to defend in space and switch every action on the perimeter. JaVale can't do that. So that's why I think he's shown what the team knew all along, in that he's a good player, but he might not be the best player for this team. And that shows that he just didn't turn out to be the guy that James Jones hoped he could be. So I don't see him proving himself and that he should be around long term for this team, who is a finals contending team. So that's my take. Folks in the chat, please put in your votes. And Zona, tell me what you think. Would Jalen Smith be different now if he had been developed the entire time, or is he just not the right fit? Tell me what you think, Zona.
I think everything you said about him positionally is kind of the reason, when they drafted him, I had concerns with their vision on him, because I think they saw him as more of like a wing or like a 4, whereas he's, like you said, he can't really switch on the perimeter. So I think his best position is playing the 5, but he's not big enough to guard, most traditional 5s. So I think he can play spot minutes at the 5, and it can go well in certain moments, but it's so situational. I think them declining his option too is going to make it more difficult for him to come back. And I think if anything, this has been kind of an audition for other teams, whether it's via trade. Like there's still a very good chance they could trade him, and this could be, James Jones could be thrilled that in a way that this gave him a chance to shine a little bit, and maybe his trade value went up. But because that's probably the best thing to do. If you're not going to keep him long term, I think you got to trade him now, because if not, he's just going to walk for nothing, and you spent a top 10 pick on him. So overall, I'm encouraged by what he's done. He's had some flashes where he looks like an NBA player, which he hasn't really had a chance to prove yet. But yeah, I think long term, I'm going to go false for now. But if he continues to play well, and maybe there's a world where they can bring him back. But to me, this, if anything, is just an audition for other teams.
I actually think he's really dramatically helped his trade value. Over this past week, he's shown to other teams that he can play basketball. Is it that he would look good in Houston? He would look good in Houston. He would look good in Detroit. He would look good on a rebuilding team. Could he develop into a guy who could be a cornerstone for you? Potentially, if given the right scheme, the right coach, the right personnel around him, covering for his faults. That always is good. It's just not that way with the Suns. As Iverson Vlog says, we need to flip sticks for another piece like Christian Wood or Jeremy Grant. It's interesting. Christian Wood, I don't know if you guys read the headlines for other teams or anything like that, but Christian Wood just got benched by his coach for not trying. Do we really want a guy like that in Phoenix? No. There's a reason Christian Wood was on the street. There's a reason Christian Wood, the Detroit Pistons, who needed to rebuild, did not want to bring him back. There's a reason for these things. Kevin Porter Jr. left at halftime because he was pissed off because of what a coach said to him on last night's Houston Rockets team. Left the game, and he got released by Cleveland or traded when he was told he was going to be either released or traded by Cleveland. Another team that wanted to rebuild at the time and needed rebuilding pieces. Don't try to have the Suns acquire malcontents or guys who other teams can't manage. That's not James Jones's style, and that's not going to help the Suns. You got to look up. I like what David Nash on the 4-point play has said, and other people have pointed out. Kenrich Williams is the kind of guy the Suns should be going for right now. They should try to trade. And Kenrich Williams, there's a reason you haven't heard about him because he's not a star, but he's a heck of a glue player. He's one of the good players, glue guys on the Thunder. They just beat a team last night, and the Thunder are better than people think. And Kenrich Williams is one of the reasons for that. He's a guy who's like a Torrey Craig. And you mentioned him, Zona, a couple of weeks ago as a great trade target. Now Jalen Smith looks like a playable player. The Thunder might actually want to acquire Jalen Smith now, after having seen him for a few games, and going to be a few more going forward. That actually might be a workable trade. What the Suns need to do is trade Jalen Smith for a guy who's like a Torrey Craig. Don't shoot for the moon, but also get a guy who can help you flesh out your wings so you have even more depth there as well. No, Christian Wood would not be great on this team, so says Jay. Geez, I'm not going to listen to you anymore. Your opinions don't matter anymore.
Yeah, talent-wise, it seems like it would, but he's had issues even going back to the draft. Like there's a reason he went undrafted and has bounced around. He's had these issues for a long time now. So I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. You got to keep the chemistry and culture intact. So yeah, Kenrich is definitely a target that I've been high on for a while. Mentioned it. And like I said, Jalen Smith playing this well, all it does is just raises trade value. So hopefully, maybe it gets them off the hook of sending an extra pick here or there if they do make a trade. So yeah, I think they're definitely going to make a trade or find someone via buyout, but it has to fit like what they're doing and their identity. They're not going to go out there and just, add anyone.
All right, go to your third, true or false.
All right. This one's kind of connected to that. We can keep it short. Just the Suns.
Yeah, we're already at hour 17.
Yeah. True or false, the Suns are, it's affecting the Suns for them to not have a G League team in a negative way.
Suns are not rebuilding, so the G League team wouldn't matter. I know there's other teams with two-way players and G League veterans and end-of-bench guys who are helping them out. The Suns have had that. They got, look, James Jones doesn't want young guys who are G League level playing in his rotation for a finals-bound team. If the Suns are not rebuilding and trying to find talent, then they don't need that G League team right now. Plus, you can always assign players to G League. The notion that your G League team is playing your same scheme, that did not help. The Suns had the Prescott team playing their scheme for 3 years, and that didn't get any players more ready to play in the big league rotation than they were if they had gone to some other team. So I disagree on the G League being a difference maker for this Suns team. What do you think, Zona?
Yeah. No, I agree. I don't think it's really making an impact on this team. I think on some teams it could, but the Suns they've been hit with probably their largest wave of COVID, like knock on wood that they will. So this is just like kind of the low point of that with the depth and all that. And once they get past this, it's not going to really matter.
All right. What's your fourth, true or false?
All right. True or false, Chris Paul should be shooting the ball more or be more aggressive offensively.
Chris Paul is averaging only 14 points a game this year. That's well down from last year. It's absolutely true. He's certainly in the first half. He's trying not to take a single shot in the first half of games. He would rather the team, hey, Coach Fallen Founder. Yes, true. He needs to shoot more. Yes, you made it. the Suns need Chris Paul to be more of an offensive threat to be their best selves for sure. Chris Paul is trying not to put too much effort. I think he's trying not to put too much offensive effort in the first half of the year, so he saves himself more for the playoffs and all that. He's got to be a little bit gun shy, worried about, am I going to be fresh for the playoffs? Because that just killed him not being healthy all playoffs this past year after having such a great regular season. And the Suns are still within a game of the best record in the league. So I think he needs to be more aggressive for them to be their best selves. And he will be more aggressive as the year goes on, for sure. I think that's true. Whether they need that for him for every night for the Suns to win games, I hope that's not true. And he's certainly trying to prove it's not true. What do you think, Zona?
Yeah, I think you put it pretty well. I think it just depends on the night. Like there's games where he needs to and he's not. He's definitely pass first, and it reminds me of Steve Nash sometimes, where it's like you just shoot the ball, dude. Like you're a best option. Like no one has it going right now. But there's also other games where I think it's beneficial to have, Bridges running those Booker sets, or looking to get DeAndre involved early and throughout the game. So I think it kind of depends on the game, but for the most part, there's definitely been multiple moments this year where it's just like been frustrating, and you need him to shoot the ball, and it seems like he's trying a little too hard to just be that playmaker. But obviously, that one game when Booker told him, shoot the damn ball at halftime, and he went out and took over. I can't remember which game it was, but they ended up winning because of it. If he just does that every once in a while, whenever they need that kickstart, then I think that's probably for the best.
Buckdog asks, would you honestly give more shots to CP over Mikal, Ayton, and Cam? Yeah, he's one of the best shooters in the history of the game.
He's Chris Paul.
He can take as many shots as he wants to take, honestly. Should he? Will the Suns win more games if he does? Maybe not. Because then he becomes myopic, where all the defense has to do is, the reason he's passing so much is because he knows the defense is targeting and guarding him very closely. When he's open, he takes his shots. When he's not open, he doesn't. If he was taking more shots, he'd put his head down and he wouldn't be setting everybody else up as well. So, but I'd rather him taking a mid-range shot over just about anybody else on the team right now, for sure.
Yeah. Shout out to Cam Johnson. He's been killing it, right? Like,
oh God, yes.
How long is that double-digit streak? Like 15, 16 games
I just put it in my game preview this morning. I think it's 15 or 18 straight. He's leading the league in number of consecutive games with 2+ threes. And he's got 18, I think, straight games with 10+ points. So good for him. Cam Johnson's doing very well. I'd still let CP take a shot over him, though. The other thing is, I'm sorry I didn't touch it earlier, but one of the fans in the chat asked about Jeremy Grant as an acquisition target for the Suns. The problem with Jeremy Grant is he makes $20 million. You would have to trade a lot more than Jalen Smith. And no, they're not going to take Dario Saric and Jalen Smith and some other dudes who are injured and aren't in the Suns rotation. They're going to want somebody who plays for the Suns. They're going to want Cam Johnson. They're going to want Mikal Bridges. They're not even going to want Jay Crowder because they're a rebuilding team. So would you rather trade a younger player for a 29-year-old Jeremy Grant? Probably not. At least I would not. So no, they're not going to want Crowder. Detroit is the worst team in the league. They're not going to take a veteran who only plays well on good teams. So they're not that trade's not going to happen. So anyway, all right, let's move on and go to our final segment. Basically, we're going to quickly preview the week, and then we're going to talk about what the Suns need to show us once they get healthy again. We can talk about that more as the year goes on, obviously, but what would be your New Year's resolution for the Suns? So real quick, we're going to do 2 final segments, and they're going to let you guys go. Thank you so much for being here. First of all, upcoming games. Sunday night at the Hornets. The Hornets are 19-17 this year, and they've won 3 straight. Then Tuesday, they're at the Pelicans. And then either Thursday or Friday, they're home against the Clippers before we record again on Saturday morning. I think it's Thursday, the Clippers. What do you think the Suns are going to do this week, Zona? Assume nobody comes back. Assume they all stay on COVID protocols. What are the Suns going to do this week?
Muted. It could be rough. I think we saw against Boston, just how flat they fell. But yeah, this Hornets game, I'm gonna go out and say they're gonna lose this one, which isn't popular. But and then the next two after that, I think they'll probably split. So this is going to be the part of the season where those losses kind of stack up, and then once they get those guys back, I think it's been pointed out that January 6th is kind of their target to get those guys back, and then they have to ramp them up after that. So this could be that stretch where it gets kind of ugly, but then once they get back to doing what they do, they'll get back on a run.
Okay, so you're thinking it's going to be a tough week. Pick a record.
How many games is it? Is it
3?
4? 3?
Hornets, Pelicans, Clippers.
I'm going to go 1 and 2.
Okay.
I'll be negative this week because last week I was too optimistic, or the week before last I was too optimistic. So I think the COVID situation is just too much for them to deal with right now.
Yeah, I'm going to go 2 and 1. I'm going to be the optimistic one this week. I'm going to say that Biyombo is going to get himself a double-double in one of these games, and I think the Suns are going to figure out, like, Devin Booker and Chris Paul are not going to let the Suns just go on a losing streak just because DeAndre Ayton is out. That's just they had a bad week mentally, I think. Devin Booker said we're in a funny place right now, even before that Friday game against the Celtics. I think they just need to buckle back down and start playing better. And I do see that happening. Okay, give me one resolution for the new year that the Suns need to do going forward to show that they are better and have a better chance at the finals. One resolution for the coming year, Zona.
I thought about this a lot, and I was going to go something like bigger, but I think I'll just keep it kind of weird and simple. I think Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges have to combine for like at least 13 to 15 3-point attempts per game. Like those two guys need to shoot, and they need to be confident and aggressive. So my resolution for them is just shoot the damn ball a lot more, please. Like I've said for a while, Cam Johnson, they should use him almost like a Duncan Robinson type, where he's just launching threes, and he has counters to where he can, if they're going to run him off the line, he can go in and dunk on someone too. So, just shoot the ball.
All right. Shoot the ball. I agree with you with Cam is finally starting to shoot a little bit more and be more just okay with putting his threes up. Mikal, somehow his threes have disappeared. I don't know what's happening. Yeah. I can't remember the last time Mikal took 3 threes in a row without trying to close out on the defender. So I think that's a great resolution that Mikal should go back to being himself with a little bit of extra spice of being able to drive the ball in. But I think he's over trying on driving into the paint. I'm just gonna go a little bit next to those guys and go with Cam Payne. My resolution for the new year is that Cam Payne goes back to being Cam Payne from last year.
That's a good
I'm going to
one.
lead the campaign to get the old campaign back. He can sprinkle in a floater or two if he wants to, but he's just got to get aggressive again. He's got to take those threes. He's got to make those threes. We need 40% shooting campaign back on threes, and we need a guy who's going to just be aggressive and not turn the ball over. He's had way too many turnovers this year. So I think if Cam Payne becomes himself again, Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson go back to shooting the ball a lot. I think the Suns have already shored up some of their other weaknesses. They'll be even better this year than last year. All right. Thank you so much for your time today, Zona, for joining us on the East Coast in your Airbnb. Thank you to your girlfriend for letting us have you for an hour and a half. Give her a big hug for me. I've never met her, but still give her one anyway. And tell us where we can find you coming up on socials and the internets and stuff.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at ZonaHoops_. My work at brightsideofthesun.com, zonahoops.com. And yeah, Happy New Year to you. It's I'm ready to get back to Arizona though.
It's cold here too, but not as cold as back east. My name is Dave King. You can find me at Dave King NBA on Twitter. You find our show on the audio because we do midweek audio pods, although the last couple of weeks we haven't, but we will pick up on those again. Find our show on all of your podcast channels that you listen to. Pick one and subscribe, rate, and review for us. And then, of course, you find our writing, both Zona and I, on brightsideofthesun.com. That's the best Suns fan site out there. And will be covering the team going forward. So please take a look for us around the interwebs, and thank you so much for joining us today. And I appreciate y'all. You have a good year. Happy New Year, and I hope your 2022 is better than 2020.